Now we got it. Okie dokie. All right. Committee members, how many we got here? It's going to be like shooting quail this evening. They're going to be flocking in and flocking up and getting shot down and running everywhere. So, all right. I don't see, I told him he'd go first if he was here, and I do not see Alan Powell, because he said he had a short bill. Of course, that's probably a lie, too. All right.
You mean go?
Here you go. Go do your bill. Wait a minute, let me get your mic on. Wait a minute. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I thought you was going to your other meeting.
I thought you told me to go ahead and go now. I'll go to the other meeting and come back. Whatever you want me to do.
Go to the other meeting and come back.
All right.
Thank you. I hadn't even called the meeting to order, Mr. Hawkins.
Well,
Sorry.
you said go, so I thought you meant
Go.
talk, not go. Adios, amigos.
Go away for a little bit. Okay.
Yeah, gotcha.
We're still getting stuff out. I'm sorry, my friend. He's getting a sign-up sheet.
Our policy system will be on the way. We'll be up here.
I got a sheet of paper. Just put your name, what bill you want to talk on, and for or against on there if you would. Says you need the prayers and I need to practice. I think that's how it goes. Lord, we do thank you for this day. Thank you for allowing us to meet here. Lord, we just ask you to bless our actions, lead, guide, and direct all that we do. Thank you for just the ability to get up and breathe the breath of life this morning. Go with us now in Jesus' name. Amen. Thank you. All right, my whole agenda is gone to the askew. So let's see. Ms. Chandler, would you like to go down and present your bill, my dear? Would you go down and present yours, madam? Oh, no, hold on. Alan, you ready to do your bill? I was waiting on you. You can sit right here at the table if you want. All right, well, stand up there. They can move the sheet around. All right, now you promised me I was going to be short. I told them you wasn't going to lie to me.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen of the committee. I bring to you, what bill number is this? 775.
That was added on this morning. You got an email on that.
Yes, sir, and I thank you very much. This is a bill that we've been working on for 2 years, and we mean Sean Marie, our distinguished counsel in the Real Estate Commission, to be sure they had all of this language right. This deals with appraisal management companies. Back a few years ago when the economy took a downturn and there were so many bad appraisals that were linked to bank notes and such, as the Fed stepped in, they did some rather interesting things, but probably the most interesting thing was that they said that either they would control the appraisal management companies, which is a liaison between appraisers and the lenders, or either the states could do it. If the states wanted to do it, and in Georgia, it would be done by the Georgia Real Estate Commission Appraisers Board. And what this does, this puts the state into sync with the requirements of the federal agencies. And the only reason we're doing this, it's better for the state of Georgia to regulate that end of business than it is to let the feds do it. And that's simple enough.
Turn me back on. Anybody here to speak for or against the bill? Yes, ma'am?
My name is Angie Harbin, and I'm here representing credit unions. Brandy Bickle wanted to send her apologies and thanks for not being able to be here, but Chairman Powell worked with us on an amendment that's in your folder, and it essentially just includes credit unions. It is lines 137 to 141 in the bill, and it doesn't change the intent or anything like that, but we really appreciate Chairman Powell's willingness to get that language in there.
Okay, any questions from the committee to the gentlelady or to the Chairman Powell? All right, so we need a move to amend House Bill 775 as amended, and everybody found the amendment lines 137, 141? You got a question?
Well, I just want to clarify that the proposed, it just says proposed change. Do you want a motion to approve the bill before we amend it? So
No, I want
you want to
to.
amend it before we would take action on it?
Right, I want to. Golly, my mind's blank now. We need to approve the amendment to this bill. Okay, we've got to move to approve the amendment to the bill.
My question, just, I don't think this is in our form of thing. I just wanted to be clear that we're going to be striking the original lines 137 to 141 of the bill and inserting in lieu thereof the information, probably needs double quotes around it, in our amendment, correct?
Yes, we're striking what is on page 5, lines 137, section 24, federally regulated appraisal management company means, and putting in the amendment from line 137 to 141. Yes, sir.
The text in that, yes, sir. Just wanted to.
We got to move to approve the amendment. We have a second. Second. All in favor of the amendment to the bill? I think I'm doing this right. Did everyone say an aye? And now can we approve House Bill 775 as committee substitute as amended? We've got a move as amended. Do we have a second? All right, we've got a move to approve as amended and a second. Any discussion from the committee? If not, Shaw Marie, are we okay? Okay, wanted to make sure we was good there. All right, now for the vote. All in favor of this 775 as amended, let me know by saying aye. Any opposed, like sign. So that bill is amended. Madam Representative Chandler, would you come down and present House Bill 847? There's do pass by substitute, yeah, committee substitute. I'm sorry. You got to tell me how to say it. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. All right, what's your number? You want to introduce them? We're going to interrupt here for an introduction.
To the committee members, I thought we've got a new real estate commissioner. I'd like for him to stand up and be recognized because you might need to call on him one day.
And you want to introduce him?
And Mr. Dempsey is also notable that he is the better half of our House member, Katie Dempsey.
Well, that's what I was thinking. I recognized the gentleman when you sat down, and I didn't know he was our new real estate commissioner, but congratulations, Mr. Dempsey. Well, that's all right. Thank you for being with us today, sir. Representative Chandler, you have House Bill 847 before us. Do we have any amendments to go on this bill yet?
Don't believe we do. There was talk of one, but I have heard nothing else about it, so I would say no.
All right, you want to give us the LC you're working off of, my dear?
I will. It is LC 337213.
Okay, everybody have that? Okay, ma'am.
And I have with me Janet Orwick, who is the authority on the Psychology Compact, and will be assisting me in answering questions. I should say more than assisting anyway. But let me tell you a little bit about the bill first. HB 847 addresses the emphasis today on critical care as far as mental health services are concerned. We hear so much about the need for the expansion of these services. The Psychology Compact, or Psych Pact as it is known, provides an avenue for additional psychological services. The Psych Pact was created to provide an accessible and manageable regulatory structure for the practice of telepsychology and also for the practice of temporary person-to-person services. The Psych Pact facilitates the continuity of care when a client relocates, travels, etc. The patient may be in another town temporarily, and this Psych Pact would allow the psychologist to continue working with that person if that person were in another compact state. That's the key right there. It also permits psychologists to provide services to populations that are currently underserved or geographically isolated, or to address mental health care as far as the stigma of mental illness goes, and also where there's a lack of specialty care. There are two aspects of this compact. The first aspect is that of telepsychology. The second aspect is that, as I said, of temporary person-to-person services being provided. The telepsychology aspect allows a licensed psychologist to practice telepsychology in another compact state when that person has received an e-passport. The temporary face-to-face in-person aspect of this bill provides an opportunity for a psychologist who is licensed to go into another compact state for up to 30 days in a calendar year. But that person also must have some kind of certification, which is called in this bill an IPC, or an interjurisdictional practice certificate. I can never remember what all that means. You'll see throughout the bill the terms home, compact state, receiving state, and distant state. The home state and the compact state is the state where the psychologist is licensed and is physically present. The receiving state is the state where the psychologist is providing telepsychology. The distant state is the state where the psychologist is going to the compact state. Again, we're dealing with just compact states. Going into the compact state and providing temporary face-to-face services for up to 30 days. The compact will go into effect when there are 7 states who have become a part of it. Presently, there are only 3 states, and those states are Arizona, Nevada, and Utah. But there are 6 states, including Georgia, who have pending legislation, and 10 states who have such legislation under consideration. The Secretary of State's office had some concerns about this bill. We have met with them, and we have addressed all of those concerns, and now the Secretary of State is satisfied with the bill. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I'll be glad to try to answer the questions, or the authority with me will answer them.
Any questions for the gentlelady at this time? All right, well, let's have the authority speak then. You have some other words of wisdom to share with us. You want to introduce yourself, ma'am? Tell us who you are, and
Hi. I'm
pull that mic up close to you if you would.
all right. I'm Janet Orwig, and I am the Executive Director for SciPact. I am also work with the Association of State and Provincial Psychology Boards, which is the association of the licensing boards for psychology across the U.S. and Canada. And SciPact was actually created by the association at the request of our member licensing boards. They knew that there were issues, that they were having issues trying to regulate telepsychology. They know it's happening into their states now, and they needed a mechanism in which to recognize or to regulate that particular profession, and that is how SciPact came to be. And we have, Arizona actually was the first state to sign on, and the reason they did so was they had such a case. They had 2 psychologists that were practicing into Arizona from another state, and they needed to conduct a discipline on them, and they realized at the time they had no mechanism to do that. They contacted the home state where the 2 psychologists were from, and they realized that the home state realized it had no mechanism to do a discipline on these psychologists because they were not licensed the practice actually took place in another state. So SciPact was created to address those kind of issues and to provide a mechanism to regulate this and to protect the public. Thank you.
So this is telemedicine sort of run amok in those areas.
Psychology lends itself very well to telepsychology, and the research has shown that it's actually as effective, if not more so, than face-to-face. And so it is a growing area, and they needed, the licensing boards need a mechanism to help regulate it.
Wow. Yeah, every time I'm out with my grandkids and I tell them to put the phones down, we're here to talk, we're not here to text and FaceTime each other. We're not FaceTiming when we're sitting here at the table. If I'm buying dinner, you're going to look at me and talk to me. Any questions from the committee for this lady? Number 16, Chairman Powell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And this, I'm sure this probably doesn't have anything to do with your bill, but you seem to be the closest I've been able to get an answer to this. I have seen this commercial on TV about an app called TalkSpace for folks that subscribe for $49 a week so they can talk to some shrink that they don't know. Is this got anything to do with that?
This actually will help protect against that. Part of the problem with that, and I have some people behind me that can address this is probably better than I can, but that it is, you are able to provide services and you don't know who you're providing them to, and they actually don't know necessarily who their provider is. And so this will help regulate that and keep that from happening.
Is there any current regulation, or does any state have specific regulatory powers over this? Because it's just, as I have seen these commercials, it just sort of struck me that if they could get all the members of the legislature to sign up for that $49 a month, that we'd be at the mercy of whatever the psychologists are telling us.
And do not believe there is a regulatory mechanism right now to address that.
Really? Thank you.
Any other questions? And I don't see anyone signed up to speak on this bill. Am I overlooking someone? I mean, if you feel the need, you don't have to feel the need. If you don't just really feel like it, you don't have to. But I don't see a name down.
There's one thing I would like to do.
Come on up to the mic and introduce yourself, if you would, ma'am. No, you can stand there at the podium. I'm sorry.
There's one other thing I'd like to address. I think it's really important is the opiate addiction. In addictions treatment, we really need to involve the whole family for it to be successful. Otherwise, they go back to their old systems and do their old behaviors. And we know that's a crisis going on here in Georgia. Right now, what's happening is all the treatment facilities are not, they're feeling uncomfortable about reaching out to family out of state to bring them into treatment because they don't want to break the law. And so what's happening is addiction treatment is not as effective as it could be. So that's one additional thing I wanted to add. Dr. Rebecca Beaton.
Okay, and you represent,
I'm the ethics chair for the Georgia Psychological Association.
okay, thank you, ma'am. Appreciate you being here. Number 18, you have a question, Representative Effenbaugh?
Do, Mr. Chairman, to whomever, how does HIPAA play into this?
I can answer that. So the part of the regulation ethically is we only use HIPAA compliant software so that it's completely HIPAA secure.
But when you're talking to another party, family or otherwise, if one's or if they're all adults, unless they would give release?
They would they would sign an informed consent, and then if it's teleconference, it's a HIPAA compliant teleconference platform, so that you speak and see the person, like Skype, but not Skype because it's not HIPAA compliant. You'd use a HIPAA compliant platform that the doctors are using right now, the medical professions.
Thank you.
Sure, and I think you had something else to add?
My name is Dr. Anita Brown. I'm a clinical psychologist licensed in Georgia, and I'm the chair of the Legal and Legislative Affairs Committee for the Georgia Psychological Association. We feel very strongly that this bill will increase the capacity to access and be treated across Georgia and across the United States for people who are linguistically different. We have several members who speak different languages and who have a big need to serve people in other states and others who need to treat patients in Georgia who may speak a different language and yet not have access to services in their language. Also, it's an innovative platform in that the psychologists can observe patients in their home, autistic children, for instance, and others, and when Ms. Orwig said that it is an innovative and probably more accessible way to receive treatment. It truly is, because many people will not come into a psychologist's office for the fear of the stigma, and in this way you can at least initiate therapy in the privacy of your own home and be as effectively treated as elsewhere. So we do strongly encourage your support of this advancement for the future of treatment of patients and of psychology. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. We have another question. Representative Effenbaugh, you have another question?
Another question, Chairman. Maybe a very easy one. Insurance. How does that work across state lines as far as the counselors being concerned? Are they having trouble getting paid or would have?
They are not actually. Most of the major insurance companies now are accepting telebehavioral health. So there's a special code for it, and people are getting reimbursed for it.
Number 24.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I have a question for the sponsor of this bill. It's about the scope of practice of psychology. So we have limitations on scope of practice here in Georgia. And how would that be affected if this bill were to pass? Would that in any way enlarge the scope of practice of psychology within the state of Georgia, this SIPAC?
There would be no change to the scope of practice of the psychologist in Georgia. Change.
So, does it have provisions for someone who is licensed in another state via this SIPAC to provide psychological services to a Georgia person?
Yes, as long
Okay.
as that they're members of the compact.
Okay, but if that psychologist, would that be the receiving state or the distant state? If the psychologist in that distant state had a broader scope of practice in their home state, could that psychologist provide those broader services here in Georgia that would not be allowed to a Georgia psychologist?
I'm going to ask Janet to respond because I tend to get that confused.
If you're, let's say Arizona, which is one of the compact states, and so you're a psychologist sitting in Arizona, you are practicing under the authority of that Arizona license, but they are going to do practicing into Georgia as the receiving state under the scope of practice for Georgia. They will not be practicing under the scope of practice for Arizona. So it's not going to expand the Georgia scope of practice for an outside psychologist.
It'd just be a reciprocal agreement.
Thank you.
Yep.
Okay. I see no other questions, no one else to speak. What's the mind of the committee at this point? Now, let me say this. So we've got 3 states. You got to have 7 states approve it before the compact goes into effect, right? You've only got 3, so this will be the 4th, if and when it gets signed by the governor.
Correct.
Okay. All right, mind of the committee at this time. Moving second. All in favor? No, any other questions? All in favor, let it be known by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed, like sign. Thank you, madam. We will move it on to rules.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you all for being here. All right. Representative Hawkins, I kind of messed with you a while ago. Let's see if we can do this again. 9:15.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You should have LC 337367S. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
We've had a couple of changes in this bill. I'm going to be short. I understand that this bill's going to be traveling, and folks going to speak to the particulars of the bill. I've got to be back upstairs for another vote on another committee, but this bill, they came to me actually years or so ago, and I do massage. I've got bone spurs in my neck, and I believe in it. I do it rather than taking drugs. I used to take muscle relaxants, and I found a lot of results with this, and I send my patients for TMJ therapy and myofascial pain syndrome. Therapeutic massage is very beneficial in the healthcare. What you're looking at is a bill that the first part of the bill deals with definitions. Then you get into future educational parameters like adult education centers and things like that, and you know that the state is moving in that direction. It speaks to liability issues and a number of other things. There has been some problems in some communities with some of the legitimate licensed massage businesses where they have been heavily taxed by the municipality for the employer taxation or employer tax that we all pay. You know, it's based on the number of employees, but these folks are getting hit a little extra heavy. And so this is, in this legislation, it would help correct some of that. The last time I spoke to GMA, they had worked out the wordings with that. I think ACCG is semi there. They may be all the way there. That's the reason I'm going to let Stan Jones and Judy LaFay speak to you about this bill, Mr. Chairman. That's okay?
Yes, sir.
You want to come up? Oh, you want to do what do you want? That?
She can speak from there if she'd like.
All right, thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Judy LaFave. I am the Government Relations Chair for the state of Georgia, the American Massage Therapy Association Georgia chapter. We started this venture 3.5 years ago. I happened to sit on a community group in Johns Creek and heard a city council member talk about the local ordinance being changed. Come to find out, they didn't even attempt to contact the professional association. Through the Johns Creek ordinance, other jurisdictions have run similar ordinances. I cannot work in Johns Creek because of the zoning ordinance. There are other issues as well. I've got therapists that I've talked to in other counties. When they have to go, they have to be fingerprinted. Well, the fingerprinting is through the holding cells. So if there's somebody in a holding cell, they can't take them back there to have their fingerprints done, so that's a huge inconvenience. So we started looking at, do we approach this jurisdiction by jurisdiction? We noted that there were major issues with the current state statute and how the jurisdictions viewed us. So we said, let's take it to the state level. Let's clean some things up. Through other meetings with other legislators, we were told to work with our licensing board, which we have done, They are the ones who brought the education pieces in. They would like to clamp down on the diploma mills that are causing some of the issues we're having. So, other than that, that's kind of
That's what you have, huh? Okay.
for now.
Let's see, is Jody, Representative Lott here? You want to come up and speak just a moment, ma'am, and then we'll have questions? And you can, and you're in Ms. Judy?
Yes.
Yeah, we'll get you back in just a moment, ma'am. Got one more speaker on the bill.
Thank you to the committee. Thank you for Chairman for allowing me to speak. Sort of out of turn a bit here on the other side of the podium, but I just wanted to say that I appreciate the massage therapy group and Stan Jones as well for working on this bill. I think we've had an issue in our community where we've had some maybe some shady characters. I would like to say they've made some great changes on this Practice Act and done a wonderful job of trying to get these massage therapists into a professional light, so that they've created some defining things and are requiring of themselves some things that I appreciate. And they're requiring some liability insurances, wearing a badge like we have to do when we work in the hospital as healthcare providers, so that so that they can be identified. I have one concern about the bill at this point, and I just would like to say it's something that's coming from my local government, and it's just one section. It goes into the Article 2 of the bill that I believe you have in front of you. It starts on line 573. And Article 2, some of what she was describing is accurate. The local governments have certainly in some cases, put their foot down and maybe unfairly attempted to regulate massage therapy, kind of the throwing the baby out with the bathwater thing. They're hurting some really good massage therapists in an action to prevent the shady action that may go on in their community. But that being said, in Article 2, it really steps on the toes of local government. And I would just like to say that in my community alone, we've created an ordinance there in our community that has worked really well at this time. We've made quite a few arrests. They've done a good job in Columbia County, Georgia, to take care of this. There was a time, though, when we had a debate about limiting massage therapy. One of the things they don't want to happen, and one of the things in this section that they've written about, they don't want the local government to be able to limit them. But what happened in our community was the massage therapists all got together. They contacted their representatives. They contacted the community and those that use massage therapists. And we had a massive showing of concern about what was happening and what our local community was about to do to our massage therapists. And we stood up and they listened and they changed that. And I think that's the way local governments are supposed to work. So rather than us regulate this whole section, Article 2, regulating local government from the state level, I would just like to ask you all to consider if this is really what you want to do, if you want to take the authority away from your locals to create their own ordinances. And other than the Article 2, which goes into local government, I think they've done a great job with their Practice Act. If any of y'all have any questions for me, or if that's...
Any questions for the Representative Lott? We got one more speaker on the bill, and then I'm gonna make a determination what we're gonna do. I think we got two more. Okay. And what's your name, ma'am? I didn't have you down on the list, I don't think.
I'm sorry, Dr. Mary Watkins.
Mm-hmm. Okay, Miss Mary.
Okay, I'm a chiropractor from Gainesville, Georgia, and I am a member of the Georgia Chiropractic Association. I'm also president of the Georgia Board of Examiners. And we just have some concerns with the bill that's brought before us here. One of the things that we're concerned about is just the broad expansion of the bill, that the services, the scope that it's giving here. In this work, one concern is with the bodyworks therapists, there's a limitation that's put on the bodyworks therapists. If you go to 43-24A-38, it states specifically in there that it's limiting them to not being able to do manipulation of spine and joint, which is what we want to make sure that is clarified. But if we go down into the massage therapy section, that limitation is not listed there. And so we want to make sure that the limitation is is across the board there to not provide manipulation of spine or joint.
I'm gonna give you the opportunity to get that straightened out, okay?
Okay, I thank you. The other thing that I was concerned about is just making sure that the verbiage is not so broad in its content, in that it does not currently allow specificity. It just kind of it gives them a broad range. So unless it says it's excluded, they're allowed to do anything outside of that. And so in our own scope of practice, we have lists of what we are allowed to do, and so we have to follow that. So we would like to have fair playing ground on that regard.
Okay, thank you, ma'am.
So I want to thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, ma'am.
Mhm.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I'm Todd Edwards with the Association of County Commissioners of Georgia. Let me state up front that the author of this bill, as well as the firms, the Body Works folks, Stan and the group, have been very forthright with us over the past several weeks. We've shared some of the concerns. Obviously, that's not necessarily our business, the licensing, the professional, the state, the background, at least at that level. We did have concerns, as mentioned by Representative Lott earlier. I believe it's Article 2 of the article, anytime you usurp or preempt local government ordinances in this area. The bill has gotten better. However, I'll state specifically, it'd been known or had been talked that Cobb and Columbia County in particular had some of the ordinances. So I asked them, as I would with any bill, to specifically reply to the concerns that they had on the bill. And I've shared this with the groups and also the author. I'm not sure what substitute they're in. They may have been addressed. I'm just trying to be fair. It's hard to keep up a lot of bills right now. But one was by making zoning conditional in Columbia County and then having therapists, and I'm going to make this very quick, or businesses owners come before the commission to obtain an operator's license prior to them going into business. So rather than start up then finding out after the fact they weren't properly state licensed, they try to be proactive in Columbia and address this prior to the operations or the therapist operations opening up. And then second, in Cobb, they would prefer to still be able to do background checks on the owners of these massage therapy operations, and they require the owner be licensed as a state licensed massage therapist. I could have spent a lot more time, but it looks as if you wanted me to make it brief. I made it brief, Mr. Chairman. But everyone's been great to work with. I'm not sure we're quite there.
Okay, well, I'm not either, and I think at this time, prerogative of the chair, we're going to send this down to subcommittee, and it is going to be sent down to Chairman Rutledge, Professions, Boards, and Commissions. That's going to come to you for you to try to work this out. Because I started getting emails 2 or 3 days ago, for and against, talking to people, phone calls. It's just not been the consensus one way or the other on where we need to go with this. So I would like to see this worked out in the subcommittee, and time is of the essence. If we can get this done, we'll try to do something. But Chairman Rutledge, I'll get with Chairman Rutledge in the subcommittee and try to get this thing worked out so we can hear it again. Okay, is that all right with the committee? Okie dokie. Yes, sir. Quickly.
What's the difference between Body Works and massage therapist? That makes sense? Yeah.
What's the difference between Body Works and massage therapy?
Currently, Body Work is the collective group of modalities that are currently exempt under the state statute. That's
pull your mic
we
down and say that.
affectionately call it.
Pull your mic down close to you. And
Yes, sir. Okay, so currently in the state statute as it stands, practices such as reflexology, Reiki, craniosacral therapy are exempt. And so when we lump them all together, we just call it body work.
So all therapists would be body work therapists?
You could see it that way. Okay, so in the state of Georgia, I went to school for massage therapy. And during that training and in that time, I was introduced and trained in some of the body work, what's known as body work modalities, such as shiatsu. I can do a demonstration of shiatsu, and you might say, oh, well, that's shiatsu, and someone else may say, oh, that's compression. It just depends on where your training has been.
John, you want to be assigned the subcommittee?
No, thank you.
Okay. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you.
I didn't understand any of that.
Just remember, she's
Yeah, okay. All right. Chairman Rutledge, we're gonna let y'all massage that one. No pun intended. All right. Mr. Bodie. Bodie, B-O-D-D-I-E, Bodie. Representative Bodie, 748. You've got a whole group of people want to talk to you, talk with this.
Yes, sir. And thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to have Commissioner Marvin Arrington to come sit with me at the table.
Okay.
He's Fulton County Commissioner, as well as James Worthington. He's with Douglas County Developmental Services Director. And I guess I could squeeze in one other chair. We have one.
We got another one.
Okay. I have Commissioner Arrington sit right behind me. Mr. Chair and members of this committee, first of all, thank you all for allowing us to be heard on this very important bill today. Just to give a brief overview of what 748 does, it's our CAP legislation. Basically, we have three objectives with this bill, Mr. Chair. The first objective is to protect young HOA communities as well as young property owner communities and young condo communities from developers that do not complete amenities which were a part of the contract between the developer and that particular community or the developer and that particular builder. That's the first objective. The second objective is to be transparent in the turning over of documents from the developer or developer or builder of the HOA community, property community, or condo community to the new HOA board of directors. That way, Mr. Chair, that's where all the money ties are located and who needs to be paid and when they need to be paid and what type of contracts that the developer or builder has entered into. Also, we have, to me, I would suggest some non-punitive damages, civil damages, if certain aspects of the developer contractual obligations have not been made. And again, I say that they are very non-punitive nature. These are not to put developers out of business or builders out of business. And I would say that this is not an anti-builder or developer bill. It's an anti-bad builder developer bill. So what I like to do, Mr. Chairman, I kind of want to walk you through a little bit of the bill. And if we have any questions, feel free to just chime in and stop me. But the first section I wanted to mention is section 44-3-260. This basically, Chairman, is a definition section. It defines all of the definitions and terms that we have. When we drop down to the last or the end of page 2, we have 44-3-262. Basically, this is where it establishes a reserve account for the actual HOA developer. And we could talk about the reserve account a little bit more in detail. And once we get over to, and I'm jumping around in the essence of time, when we jump over to line 180, that's section 44-3-264. This is basically dealing with a new HOA and who has the majority of the votes on the HOA board of directors. And it really outlines that very well, Mr. Chairman. And then once we keep going, and this is a very important section on line 272, section 44-3-265. This deals with the actual finalization of a community and when it's actually approved, I would say, for the amenities to be have been completed. And I'll get back to that a little bit more as well. And I kind of want to jump all the way to the back because this is the most, I know this is an important section, especially for the developers, is line 409. Section 44-3268, that deals with the civil penalties that I discussed earlier. And I would say, again, non-punitive penalties for HOA developer or HOA builder if the amenities are not completed. One of the examples I want to give you, members of this committee and Mr. Chairman, in my district, we have I guess a very good example of why I'm bringing this bill. Parma Falls in Douglas County had a situation where, just to kind of broaden it down a little bit, say we have a developer, we have a new HOA community. The developer one is on the hook for 50 rooftops, 50 parcels. He's also on the hook, or she's on the hook for all the amenities. Now, if this particular HOA developer goes out of business, then we have HOA developer number 2 comes in. He's only, or she's only on the hook for the 50 plots that are left remaining. So it's a 100-plot community, but she or he is not on the hook for any of the amenities at all. So in this particular instance, we have citizens that's been calling me and calling Commissioner Kelly Robinson in Douglas County, as well as the news, complaining on what can we do. And right now, it's not a lot that can be done statutorily. And that's one of the reasons why I brought this bill. Myself and the Douglas County delegation, which is a bipartisan delegation, and this is a bipartisan bill, brought this bill because of the issues that we have been receiving. And once we actually brought the bill, we started to hear from other counties. My sister county was sister county to Douglas County. Also, I represent Douglas County as well as Fulton County, came to me with the same issues. And that's the reason why Commissioner Marvin Arrington is here, as well as the county attorney for Fulton County as well, and their lead lobbyists, because this is a very important issue, just not in the metro area, but all across the state of Georgia. Mr. Chair, you probably know that in 2016, it was discovered that Atlanta and the metro counties had a shortage of housing. With the new developments that we're trying to bring, and new companies such as Google and Amazon, and also with Apple, we're going to have more developments that are going to need to be built. And we just want to make sure that we have some type of uniformity with that, and we want to make sure that we have some type of recourse for our constituents, which some of you will hear from during the talking portion of this presentation today. So this is not an anti-builders bill, but it is a pro-consumer protection bill. If there are any questions, I can answer those questions now.
Well, let's hear a couple of your gentlemen speak. I got a bunch of people here that's
Okay.
for and against the bill. We may have a little time to talk on that.
Yes, sir.
But the
Yes,
gentleman with you, if you want to.
Good afternoon, I'm James Worthington, Douglas County Development Services Director. We support this bill. As he mentioned earlier, we've had a number of problems. They generally all arise after the economic downturn. This was not really an issue prior to that. Basically, we're just looking for a way to cover the citizens. We get a lot of calls where the original developer has bankrupt, he's out of the scene, a bank took over, they sold lots, somebody bought a portion of the lot, somebody else bought a portion, and nobody's really left in charge of the subdivision as a whole or the development as a whole to take control of these amenities. It's just a protection measure.
Well, this is not going to go back and solve anybody that. I mean, the county's on the hook for that. Now, I know we had this happen in my county next door to you, Paulding County, and our county had to eat quite a bit of money, but it's my understanding our county and cities have come up with their own resolutions in dealing with it. They require new developers to come in, post bonds. Have you guys not looked at doing that yourself? Is your county government not proposed doing that for you developers?
We already do the bonding for everything in the right-of-way, all your infrastructure, your roadway, your sidewalks and all. We've done the bonding on that for many, many years. On the amenities section, we actually have an ordinance in the Unified Development Code. We require all the amenities to be installed and operational prior to final platting, so bonds aren't required there.
But the new guys coming in, if you got a new developer coming in and we have another downturn or something happens, what's going to protect the HOA there? other than this state law. I mean, you guys have the power locally to do what you're asking us to do. I think you could go in and say you're gonna have to put up a bond or a cash deposit or something, don't you?
So we can do, currently we can do the infrastructure side of it. We've not approached doing the operational side.
But I don't know of anything that would stop you from doing that. That's my question, and maybe I'll have some other people address that in a minute. I'm just afraid that we're taking a shotgun approach to something we could do with a 30-30. You know, pick out the bad ones instead of going out here after just shooting everybody. I've argued that with a company I worked with for years. They'd have one bad actor instead of, and then they'd send out some goofy requirement that everybody'd have to do, and I'd call just raising Cain about it, and I say, damn, you know, go out there and shoot that guy. Take a 22 or a 30-06 and blow him away instead of peppering me with buckshot. You know, it just aggravates the fire out of me. So you sort of get where I'm coming from.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chair. And Mr. Chair, I think this is maybe an appropriate time to have Commissioner Marvin Arrington.
Okay,
from Fulton
he's
County.
coming around. Mr. Arrington, you want to step up, my friend?
Thank you, committee members, for the opportunity to come before you today. This is a matter I think that is of grave importance because it represents most people's largest investment in their life, their home. And the whole reason that we came up with this was simply to protect Georgia homeowners. In Fulton County, we have a transition ordinance that basically states that before the declarant can transfer the association over to the homeowners, that declarant must bring all of the amenities up to code. And so that makes sense, but if you live in Douglas County or Henry County or Paulding County, there is no such transition ordinance. And so we thought basically from our discussions, and we've heard from over 10 commissioners in 8 counties about similar problems, and our thought was that a state law that would provide uniformity for transition from developers to the association would be the best route. And if I can, Mr. Chair, I just wanted to share a few facts with you. There are over 2 million Georgians that live in over 798,000 homes in nearly 10,000 community associations. These residents pay about $2.3 billion a year towards the local economy in Georgia. 72,000 Georgians are elected to their community associations, and they provide $2.4 million worth of hours of community service. And so 66% of the residents feel that the rules protect and enhance their property values. And so in addition to, Mr. Chair and committee members, in addition to the transition portion of the ordinance, there are bonding things in effect for the sidewalk, but there are no bonding requirements in place for retention and detention ponds. And so what happens, and I guess what we're trying to do is to protect against the worst case scenario, not necessarily regulate what would happen on a daily basis, but what we've seen time and time again throughout Fulton County and various counties is that a developer goes bankrupt, there's no reserve fund, the retention and detention ponds haven't been maintained for 15 years, and then it's stuck on the Georgia homeowners. And so basically we wanted to try to do whatever we can to protect Georgia homeowners, and we're asking you all to try to help us to protect Georgia homeowners so that they do not get stuck in any of these worst case situations, and that if they do, there is at least a minimum reserve fund. This is not to put any additional requirements really on anyone. When a developer or a builder starts an association, they started off with a fund. They say, all right, this is what the operating fund will be for that year. We're simply asking that they take 10% of that and set it aside for reserves, so that if in case they do go belly up and go bankrupt, there is at least some protection for the Georgia homeowners. And so we ask you all to do that. We think that it is a reasonable request. We think that protecting over 2 million Georgia homeowners is why you all are here, and we thank you for the opportunity to come before you today and ask you to rule favorably on this bill.
Let me ask a question. I was reading, the reserve funds remain in the account until the final plat is filed and turn over, and you know, this is a completed subdivision, so once the subdivision is completed, everything's done. The gentleman has built out all the houses, got the clubhouse built, the swimming pool built, the retention ponds done, and the roads paved properly and all that. Then the reserve fund is turned over to the HOA at that time. Is that what I was reading on lines 77 and 78?
Yes, Mr. Chair. But basically, even after it's turned over to the association, typically the declarant will remain in control of the board. Typically, there's a declarant control board for anywhere from another 7 to 14 years, or until there is complete or 90% or 70% build out as outlined in the declaration.
Okay. Yeah, I know. I've run into some of the worst headaches I've had has been HOAs, people that, they liens filed against them and things happened over the years that, God Almighty, it's just that is a problem with people that don't want to pay their association dues and all kind of stuff. But that's a different animal there. Number 15. Do you have a question this time?
Mr. Chairman, yeah, just very briefly, you asked part of my question, but I will say that I understand the author's intent to correct a wrong that has been passed on to many a consumer. What I wanted to ask was, we're not talking about any additional funds being asked for. We're just asking for the funds that are required, that there be some set aside for some bonding or reserve.
Yes, I mean, and typically the bond, you get $1 million bond for, less than $2,000, $5,000, and so I mean the fact that the cost of the bond I think would be minimal, particularly for retention and detention ponds. And then yes, as far as the operating budget, we're just asking for 10% for reserves.
And just to add to what Commissioner Marvin Arrington is saying, and thank you so much, Commissioner. If you look at lines 273 through 274, we're not even really asking for a performance bond at that time. We're basically stating that if this is a HOA or property association, we would just like you to complete the amenities before the final plat is approved. The only time that we're really asking for any type of performance bond is when we jump to line 365. That is basically, Mr. Chair, when we have condo associations. Now, I'm gonna let James talk a little bit more about that. One of the reasons why we require a bond in that particular situation is because most of the time, the developer of that condo owns the building but not the land. And so I'll let James talk a little bit more about that.
Let me ask a question
Yes,
to Councilman Arrington here. Now, in Fulton County, could you guys not go in your county and put in everything in county ordinances that we're asking for here? Could y'all not do that as a county for what you're asking for us to do statewide?
We could, Mr. Chair, and I guess each individual county could as well. We just thought that it would be more efficient than trying to do it 159 times to come to the legislature.
Okay. I think that sort of goes to my feeling of local control there, but I appreciate your answer, my friend.
Well, and also, Mr. Chair, in addition to representing Fulton County, I also founded the Georgia HOA Alliance, which is a nonprofit with over 50,000 members throughout the state. And so we host HOA boot camps and training sessions. We started hosting them in Fulton County, but we had people coming from Paulding, we had people coming from Clayton and Cobb and DeKalb because of the very issues that you were saying. And it's the same issues echoing over and over again throughout the state, and not just Fulton County. So I just wanted to say, I'm here on behalf of Fulton County, but I also have a, thank you.
You got to get the fingers in a lot of pies out there. They're the ones you're working on. I interrupt you.
I was going to let Mr. Worthing kind of give that breakdown of that bit difference, because what we're trying to say here, and I think Commissioner Marvin understands the same thing. It's not as much of it as a money issue as a consumer protection issue.
Thank you. So this bill can look at multiple different kinds of developments. So on the residential type development, which is a very common type to have homeowners association, generally they will always have a final plat regardless of municipality. There's some land division in there, a plat process that goes through. On any of those developments that require a final plat, the bill proposes that the amenities shall be installed and fully functional prior to getting that final plat. In the instance a development is not going to be required to have a final plat, and there shouldn't be many of those, then there is the bonding structure spelled out beginning in line 367 only in the instances where final plats are not required. And those would typically only be condo developments and things where there's not a land division. You own the building and not the land.
And Mr. Chair, just to kind of add, because I want to make sure I stress the penalties area, we sat down with the Home Builders Association as well as Community Growth, and we talked about some of the things that they saw as concerns, and I know one of the big concerns were the civil penalties. And so from our conversation, what I was able to digest from that is that, one, if developer number 2 is not on the hook for anything, as far as the amenities is concerned, we want to make sure we absolve that person, that entity from being sued. And so we've done that. We also made it where it's a one community, one occurrence violation. So if the pool is not built out, if the sidewalks come back and they not up to code, they can only come for that $5,000, which is capped as far as damages are concerned. So you can't have the HOAs going for every little thing. If you have one occurrence for that particular community, that's going to be the one lawsuit, and hopefully it's not a lawsuit brought, but that's the only time they will be facing litigation.
We got several people lined up to speak. Now, I forgot to announce, this is hearing only today. We're not voting on anything today. Austin, you're first up to speak. You want to come up, Mr. Hackney, and share with us? And we got, 7 people looks like signed up. So you want to go to the microphone over there, sir?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. My name is Austin Hackney. I'm the Government Affairs Director for the Home Builders Association of Georgia, and I brought the President of the Greater Atlanta Home Builders Association, Jim Chapman, with me today to talk about this bill, and wanted to thank Representative Bodie for meeting with us last week and talking about this bill and really giving me the time to go through the whole thing with him and talk about what we had opposition to within the bill, and I say that to say that the Home Builders Association of Georgia does oppose House Bill 748, he was correct to say that we talked all the way through it. We talked about the financial requirements at the outset of the development. We talked about we really talked about the original version of the bill, which is not in front of you today, but there were plenty of things that he made concessions on, and I appreciate that of him. There was a provision in there that held back the 25% of the buildable lots until those amenities were complete. One of the issues with that is that some of our developments aren't built out by the developer. The lots are sold, and it's pretty hard to sell a lot that says do not build on the building permit for the lot. So he took that into account. I appreciate his help there. While the bill that's before you today is not as objectionable as we found the original version, there are still plenty of instances in there that we think are unnecessary overreaches by the state legislature if it were to pass this bill, that I think, to your point, Mr. Chairman, some of these issues could be taken care of at the local level. I think that maybe all 159 counties would not see the need for the measures in this bill, and I understand that some of the issues that came up that inspired the language in this bill may have come from some developers who didn't make it through the recession, and there was some the transition between foreclosed properties and moving out of the recession, there was some bumps in the road there. So before we pass a bill that has an effect on all of Georgia's home builders, I want you to hear from one of Georgia's home builders who does manage these HOAs successfully and is trying to build out these developments and transfer them to the HOAs, the people that live there. So without any further, I will hand this over to Jim Chapman, who's president of the Greater Atlanta Home Builders.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and body. Jim Chapman Communities, Georgia native, Atlanta native. I specialize in active adult communities, building for those 55 and over. I've actually had a very successful development in Douglas County, in which I completed the amenities at the front. Primarily, I do that every time because I like to sell houses and I like to sell lots, and it's a great way to make that happen. I think the chairman hit the nail on the head. I'll sum it up quickly and give you a few more facts that I believe this is something that's already being addressed and addressed well in each county and or city. I think this is overreaching to be dealt with on a state level. Very specifically regarding what the gentleman said about detention ponds, I just did a community in Forsyth. The detention ponds were certified both, all four of them, by my engineer prior to final plat approval, number one, and then they were bonded off for future maintenance for X amount of years. All that was handled by Forsyth County. Imagine that. They could do it on their own. They did not need the state to tell them what to do. So that's just one example. Another example regarding HOA docs is a city or county attorney will typically, before you get a final plat, review your HOA or your COA docs to make sure they're in order. That happens to me all the time, and that's handled very successfully. If I were to make a huge investment in a 200-lot development, and I had to relinquish control within 5 years to the HOA, and I still had 20 lots left, most times developers make all their money at the end of the development. And I'm turning over not only control of the HOA, but potentially the declarancy. The gentleman described the declarancy completely inaccurately earlier. The declarancy has everything to do with the Architectural Review Board. So to maintain the value of all my lots throughout the entire process, I need to maintain the declarancy. And there are provisions, if you will take personal responsibility and read your HOA or condominium docs before you make a personal decision with your own money and a personal investment, you will be able to decide. You have every right to have those reviewed by an attorney. You have every right to, in a condo, to rescind your contract within the first 7 days. These are already laws. You can determine whether these situations are appropriate for you or handled correctly. So I'm a big proponent of local control. Nothing against you guys, but I think locally this can be handled. I think it is being handled. I think the gentleman represents some very unfortunate circumstances that I feel for them. That's happened a lot. It's awful. But trying to create one sweeping address to that and sweep all of those of us who I feel try and do the right thing and are creating new communities into that bucket, I think is a wrong thing to do. Thank you for your time.
You have a question, I believe, sir.
Yes, sir.
Representative Harrell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Chapman, a couple of the things you mentioned that could be problematic for a builder, the 25% set
Yes,
aside
sir.
of lots and the gaining control later on. We've heard that most local communities could probably adopt everything contained in this measure locally if they so choose. But in some cases, like those you've mentioned, could it be so restrictive that builders, if it wasn't statewide, would choose to build in another community?
But most certainly. I mean, for instance, there are certain counties right now who have very, I believe, openly but quietly adopted a no growth policy. And there are many of us who are not making investments in those communities.
So an advocate for this type of level of control, but not wanting to lose investment in their own community, might seek a statewide uniform standard, thereby not allowing you the opportunity to invest dollars in a marketplace that you saw more favorable.
True.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Yes, ma'am.
Hello, my name is Helen Willis. I'm a councilwoman in the city of South Fulton, and I'm here to speak to you from the lens of a consumer. I do support uniformity. I do support regulation on a state level, and I'm going to give you some reasons why. I live in Creekside subdivision, and our builder was Knight Incorporated. The subdivision was built in 2005. I joined the association in 2006 when I built my home. The association dues were $200 at the time. We have about 375 units in our subdivision, 4 phases. We have about 6 lots remaining to be sold. We are still under the declarant until 2020 or until 100% of the lots have been sold. We have no say-so in what happens with our HOA. Our association dues have gone up by 100%. We now pay $400 a year. And I get, it's because maybe some residents haven't been paying their association dues, but they have not given us any financial justification for increasing our HOA dues. We do not get annual financial statements, and this bill will ensure that happens. Also, for us to have been hostage for 13 years, I think is really unfair. This bill will rectify that because within 5 years, the HOA would have to be turned over to the HOA community. We want to take over our HOA, but we are not allowed to because we have to wait until 2020 or we have to wait until 100% of our lots have been sold. Also, we went through a fiasco in 2013 where our declarant did not pay our property tax bills for our amenities. So because we have astute residents in our community that keep up with the public postings in the Daily Reporter, we found that our clubhouse was about to be auctioned on the courthouse step 2 days before the auction was supposed to take place. So our declarant has also hired a community association management company. And whenever we have issues that arise, the management company always blame the declarant. And they say they're in the middle, they don't pay the property tax bills, the declarant is actually taking on that function. So you can imagine the uproar that and the confusion that caused in our community when we felt like we were about to lose our clubhouse, our pool, and eventually it did get solved. It did get resolved. The declarant did send a certified check to the community association. We did get it paid within 24 hours, but we never really got a full understanding to why it was never paid. Also,
I'm gonna have to ask you to speed it up. We've got 3 more
Sure.
people, and we're gonna have to be out of here about 3:30, ma'am.
Sure.
If you don't mind.
I'll close up. Most recently, we have yet to have a annual HOA meeting. So we were sent a financial report with several errors and very vague details. Recently, we found out that the declarant, we have a new declarant, and none of the homeowners were notified. We have a new declarant as of August 2017. The reason I found out we have a new declarant because we couldn't get access to our clubhouse for a community meeting, and I went to the community association office, and at that time, that's when I was given this, and I'm closing with this, assignment of declarant's rights. And that's when I found that we now have a new declarant. So I do support this bill. I feel like we do need to have a statewide regulation and standard on how
Let
Thank
me
you.
ask a question, because this is not going to go back and correct what you've going through, though, because I've had the same situations in my county that people have gone bankrupt when they were in the process of building subdivisions, and they can't go back. I mean, they're in the same situation you are going forward. They're going to have to work through it. This would only affect anybody coming in the future.
And I understand that, and what I'm saying is that we're at the end because we're almost near
Right.
2020. But will help is help for the new. It will help residents.
But as a councilwoman for what city now?
City of South Fulton.
South Fulton.
And this is plaguing our community. We have a lot of new development in our
But
community.
could you guys not come in and do this local ordinances yourself to prevent this without it being a statewide? You guys, as a city council and mayor in your community, could you not bring this up and do it?
We can do this, Chairman, but as Commissioner Arrington stated, that this is not just a city of South Fulton
I
issue.
understand.
This is an issue throughout the state of Georgia. I am a native of Savannah, Georgia, and when I go home, I hear these same concerns. So it needs to be regulated statewide.
Okay.
Thank
you,
you.
ma'am. Let's see, we got Mr. Black, homeowner, Mr. Black here. And I'm gonna have to give you just a couple of minutes. We got other meetings we're gonna have to get to in just a few minutes, my friend. I'm sorry to cut you short.
Okay, no worries. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and committee members. I also have one of my neighbors, Chris Mosley.
Okay, I got Christopher down.
We
Okay.
live in the same community in South Fulton. I actually bought my home last February, and I can relate to almost identically the situation she described. I thought that I was going to have access to a pool, all of these amenities. Although they were, completed at some point, now they're just they haven't been operating for the last 4 or 5 years, and I didn't know about it. So I'm supporting this bill also so that no one else has to go through this with new communities. Although it's not going to impact us necessarily, why should anyone else have to go through it or spend time in 159 times in different counties? I just think it should be widespread. If you can make one decision for the benefit of Georgia homeowners, why not?
Okay, thank you very much, my friend. And Christopher?
Yeah, I would just like to say I support this bill for specifically transparency. It is really important that you and I and everybody else in this room understands where they are putting their money whenever they spend over $100,000 on a purchase. So for me, or any amount of money in that regard. So for me, my issue that I've had with my HOA has come from transparency, asking where this money is going. As Mr. Black said, our amenities were completed but have not been upheld, and so now we are unable to use these amenities even though they're completed. So we have a swimming pool with a tarp over it because our HOA has been in battle with water companies. So then it becomes where is the money going? And that is a direct result of the lack of transparency that we're getting. So like Councilwoman from South Fulton said, and Mr. Black, I think it's really important for us to mandate it across the state so everybody in the state of Georgia is very clear about what they're spending $400 a year or $1,600 a year in my situation a year for an HOA. And so that's why I'm here.
Thank you, sir. Two more real quickly, Tiffany, and then we got people outside waiting to come in. I got Tiffany and Jeff. Is Jeff spoken? Jeff, you want to come up and make a pitch real quick? And I'll make a decision here in a minute, and we're gonna move on. Yes, ma'am.
Good afternoon, Chairman and members of the committee. My name is Tiffany Stewart Stanley, and I'm the Director of External Affairs for Douglas County. I'm here on behalf of the Douglas County Board of Commissioners to express support for House Bill 748. This bill is in accordance with our legislative priority that was adopted by the board to provide stronger protections for homeowners and associations and property owners. And we do concur with Commissioner Arrington and Councilwoman Willis that a statewide approach to this would be better for the citizens of Georgia and more efficient.
Thank you, ma'am. Jeff, you're the last speaker.
Mr. Chairman, thank you for letting me have a little time. I represent the Realtors. Jeff Ledford, I'm our Director of Governmental Affairs. Our concern, and I apologize, I haven't seen the latest version of this, but our concern was with what it could do to as far as stifling development, some things like that. And also looking at this as much of this is already, there's an ability to address it at the local level. And so with that, we're happy to look at some of the changes that have been there. But much like the home builders feel that a lot of this is, as you put earlier, kind of taking a shotgun approach to something that we might be able to look at. Is there a better way to handle it under current law and with the ordinances that could be done locally?
All right, I told the representative when we started discussing this some time ago, and I know he worked on it diligently, and we postponed it a week or so ago, but I'm going to pass this down to Subcommittee Andy Welch, Chair of Regulations. I'm going to ask this bill go to his Regulations Subcommittee and see if they can work out some issues with this and see if it merits bringing back up. Okay? Thank y'all for being here. We've got another group coming in. Thank y'all.
Thank you.